Good morning. The most enthusiastic response I've heard in a while. That's great. Welcome to Ignite, first session of the second day. My name is Matt Steele. I'm the lead program manager for Azure Signup and Billing. This morning we're going to be talking about billing on Azure with a little bit of subscription management. We've got a lot of material to get through. So I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until the end. I've allotted a bunch of time at the end for us to go through questions. And I've got a big stack of free Azure passes for folks that ask me questions either at the end or after the session. So I'm really interested in your questions. We've got a lot to learn here on our side and want to help you guys as well. So in 2008, I was there in Los Angeles when we first announced Microsoft Azure. And I was super excited. I worked on a very different product at the time, and so the cloud stuff was new to me too. So later when I had some time, I went home, I signed up, I put in my credit card, I got a bunch of cloud services going, worker roles, web roles, everything talking to each other. I was so excited. I was just amazed at how easy it was. And said a few happy words and then said, okay, so let me just pause these all. And then I'll close my browser, and then I closed and didn't really think about anything else for a while and went on with my job and forgot about Azure and kept going for about a month. And at the end of the month, it turned out that the pausing action didn't really stop the billing action. And so, by the way, if anyone says billing isn't exciting, getting an unexpected bill from a cloud vendor is very exciting. It got my heart rate going quite a bit. And so it's amazing how things are a little bit different with the cloud. You can elastically scale your resources to meet your business needs, but that puts a bunch of new demands on where we are. So while we've made a lot of progress on unexpected bill type of issues, and I called up Microsoft support and they helped me out. They were very great. If you've run into the same issue, which I'm sure some of you have, please call support. And if you have any trouble with support, please email me. You'll see my email later in the presentation. But this puts a bunch of new requirements on the budgeting process. No longer can we do these really long, okay, I got to buy out a data center, and there's this long budgeting process, and you end up overspending a bunch because you've got to have capacity to handle peak. And that's really great from an IT perspective. But from the budgeting perspective now, we can elastically scale. We can do all kinds of interesting things. A lot of the budgeting and financial aspect of this hasn't caught up yet. And so there's a lot of work to do here. Gartner calls this IT financial management, or ITFM. In 2013, they estimated the market to be around $250 million, but it's been growing very, very rapidly ever since. There's a bunch of vendors that work on IT financial management. And we have a bunch of new capabilities to enable those vendors. We're going to talk about that, and also to enable you to have a better experience. From the Microsoft perspective, we want to take away any barriers you might have to moving to the cloud. That's why we put so much work into security, so much work into compliance, things that people are concerned about when they think about moving to the cloud. And one of the next things that we're looking at is, gosh, this financial management aspect of being in the cloud, especially in cloud hosting. So there's a lot of software as a service offerings out there, including, Office 365. With Office 365, you pay for a set of users, and largely your bill is very predictable. When we start to turn on things like auto-scaling in Azure, you can have much less predictability. And then as we bring all the complex organizational aspects that people already had to deal with and start to deploy organizations into the cloud, we have a bunch of problems around charging back to different departments. How do we make sure that we're taking advantage of the best rates and getting the best deal we can across all the departments and all the organizations in these larger enterprises of enterprises that we have coming into the cloud? So we're beginning this journey on our side. We're investing very heavily on it from Microsoft. I'm sure some of you have had some billing experiences that weren't the best, and we're going to go fix that. And part of today is about me sharing where we are on billing and on subscription management, as well as hearing from you later on what do we need to do, where do we need to go. So we're starting this journey. We want to do it right. We're going to start by going through very, very basic billing and subscription management. So this will help us level set. Some folks are very new to Azure, aren't sure where to go, how to do things. We'll start to talk about that. I'll show a little bit of a demo of how you can go in, change some of your billing aspects, manage a little bit of your subscription. We'll take a brief look at an invoice, just see what that looks like. That won't take too long. Then we'll take a more detailed look at the usage CSV file, comma separated value file, that we allow you to download to really get a detailed view of your usage. And then we're going to talk about something brand new called the Usage API, and I'll demo that. This is a more, in and of itself, it's a more developer-targeted feature, but what it does is it lights up an ecosystem of vendors to come in and provide IT financial management on top of Azure. And that's a very, very exciting piece of news I have for you today. And then through all of this, I'm going to be talking about what's coming next, what are we doing, how are we trying to make things better. And then as we get into the Q&A, I'm going to talk about specific things that are coming next, specific investments we're making, larger areas of investment we'll be making over the next year or so. And then I want to hear a whole bunch from you folks about what's working, what's not, what's inadequate, where you need to see investment to feel better about our cloud offering. So let's start with the basic billing and subscription management. So the first thing when you're thinking about the Azure bill, right now, you know probably about the Azure Preview portal. You might have been to the Azure Management portal if you've used Azure before. But for usage and billing activities, there's another portal called the Accounts portal. And Azure grew up in a very organic way, and that was part of innovating very fast and offering customer value fast. And so what evolved over time was two different portals, the Management Plane portal and the Accounts Usage and Billing portal. And we're in the process of pulling that accounts and usage into the Azure Preview portal as it looks to be generally available later in the year. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is how you actually get there, and we'll show you that in just a second. But the usage and billing is at account.windowsazure.com. If you go from the current management portal, you can click that. So on the far left here, you see, you can click down on your name there and just click View My Bill. And that's how you get to this portal. If you're curious about the management portal, you get there when you're on the accounts portal by just clicking portal right up there on the top right. And then the two URLs up there are just the current management portal and then the Azure Preview portal with some of the new capabilities that are being offered there. So one thing that's important to understand is that how you buy affects how you manage. And there are a bunch of different ways to buy Azure. We have a bunch of different offers for folks. And who you buy through and how you buy does affect how you manage. So how do these offers vary? You can buy directly. You can go to the website and just say, hey, I want to buy some Azure. I want to sign up for a free trial, or I want to get a pay-as-you-go subscription. You can also buy through a partner today using the Azure and Open program. And you can also sign an enterprise agreement with Microsoft strictly for Azure. So you can buy just Azure, or you can buy a bunch of other aspects or a bunch of other offerings from Microsoft and buy through EA. Usually when you go through EA, you make a big commitment, and then you use those dollars as you go, and you get a much better rate by making that commitment up front. We used to offer a commitment in the direct channel, and we'll be offering one again that you'll hear more about over the summer as that offer becomes a little bit closer. And then how do other things vary? Well, some offers include credits. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Some offers include included quantities, so you get a certain amount of storage or a certain amount of compute coming with that offer. And then some offers include discounts, so I get to run VMs for cheaper. So what are the popular offers? Well, probably the most popular that people are trying all the time is the free trial. If you go to Azure.com, you'll see a big try it free right now, and that's the fastest way to get onto Azure. You get $200 in a month to try Azure, and then at any time you can just convert over to a pay-as-you-go subscription and use Azure in the normal pay-as-you-go fashion where you only pay for what you use. Another interesting offer, skipping down a little bit, is the MSDN offer. So if you're a developer, if you're a member of MSDN, you get a credit, and you also get to take advantage of discounts on Azure. So go to your MSDN account homepage, and it'll say, take advantage of your Azure credit. You can go do that, come over, and then you get, anywhere up to $150 a month of free Azure to use on development and testing of your applications. You also get discounted rates on the virtual machines that you use, so you can actually, you don't have to worry since you're not paying the licensing fee for Windows Server or Windows Client. You also get access to Windows Client VMs, which most folks don't get access to in the cloud, even if you pay for it. Other offers we have, like I mentioned, EA. With EA, it affects how you manage because EA has its entirely own portal called the Microsoft Azure Enterprise Portal. And that's a place you can go. It has different offerings. You can manage who in your organization is allowed to create Azure subscriptions, who's entitled to do so. You can also, with some of the features that we've just released, manage some of your spending and create alerts by department in the EA portal. We're not going to talk a lot about the EA portal right now because it's very specific to EA customers. But I do want you to know that there's a bunch of unique features there. BizSpark and BizSpark Plus, these are some of our programs for startups and businesses. You can talk to your Microsoft contacts about that. The Microsoft Partner Network, MPN, is another way that if you're a Microsoft partner, you can get discounts and get an offer to work with your customers on. And then Azure and Open, this is, I don't know, maybe some folks are familiar with Office and Open. This is getting a 5x5 key, buying it usually from a reseller. And you can buy whatever that reseller is offering in terms of a prepaid card. You enter that 5x5 key into Azure, and then you've prepaid for Azure, and then you can use as much as you want as you take down that prepay. So if you want to learn more about our offers, I put the URL right there. You can see it on the slides. So what can be managed? And we're going to show you the actual portal in just a second here so that you can sort of get that visualization of what management looks like inside the accounts portal. But there's two big categories here. There's billing management and there's subscription management. One of the biggest things we want to understand, we're going to do a deep dive on, is usage. So what is being used? Who is using it? How is that working? Understanding the invoice, which is sort of a roll-up of all that usage, being rated, and then also reflecting whatever taxes are applicable and whatever credits or discounts you might have obtained. And then managing all those costs and usage by the cost center or project. One of the things we'll talk about as time goes on is actually pulling in some of the new Azure Resource Manager concepts like resource groups and being able to look at usage underneath a resource group, or tags, being able to tag certain things as being part of a project and then saying, okay, everything that's tagged as, you know, my finance department, what's their bill look like? What does their usage look like? And then finally, some of the more sort of mediocre day-to-day types of things like changing payment instruments. I'll take a second and make an impassioned plea. Everybody that starts up with Azure Direct puts in a credit card, and a lot of times they start to use Azure and do a great job. And then their credit card expires. And we send mails like crazy. We're sending mails and saying, hey, your credit card is expiring. Hey, you haven't paid. And after about 48 days of non-payment, we finally, after all these attempts to contact users, we finally have to stop the Azure subscription from working. We're looking at a bunch of different ways to have better warning here and to really make sure we're talking to customers. We're doing pilots on calling customers. But there's still some customers who let this actually fall over, and it actually impacts the production service for them because their credit card expired and they didn't come back and update it. So if you're signing up and you start using Azure a whole bunch and you're using a credit card, we will have a whole bunch of notification features coming along the way in addition to email for you. But remember, if your credit card, you lose your credit card, you have to do something different with it. You lose your corporate Amex and have to do something different, reset it or get a new credit card. Come back to your Azure subscription and change it. It'll help you. Under subscription management, it's very straightforward stuff. You can do a little bit of managing administrators. Right now, you have to transfer subscription ownership. You have to call up support and do a support-initiated transfer. Later in the year, we're going to have self-service transfer, so that makes it a little bit easier. Employee gets terminated, or somebody moves on from a role and has to transfer their Azure subscription. We'll have that as we move forward. And then there's just the sort of straightforward things like changing account details and canceling a subscription. So let me pull up the actual Azure portal and show you guys what I'm talking about in case you haven't seen it. Okay. Get to the right screen here. So these are my personal subscriptions. whole bunch of different things that I've created over time. We can dive into MatsD, and I use this one just for my own personal use. I create things. Now, it's timed out at this point, so it's asking me to sign in. This is what we do to make sure we're protecting your financial data. So I have to sign in again. I'm using a Microsoft account for this particular account. So as it signs in here, we'll come back to the same page, and we'll see, here we are at summary for MatsD. So I have a pretty small bill right now. You can see that I have a few options up here. I have the overview. Billing history, we'll go there in a second. I have alerts, which is in preview right now. We'll be making that generally available later this year. Alerts in preview allows me to set up alerts on how my spending is doing. You can see some of the spending on the previous page, but on the alerts I can add an alert. And these are pretty basic right now. So when I click add an alert, I can name the alert, I can specify the amount sent, and then I can specify the emails that get sent once we approach that alert. So I can, if I'm monitoring that email account, I can get some basic alerts on how my spending is going. If we come back to the overview, in this subscription, I have a few options. I can change the payment method. Right now, this subscription is a direct subscription, so my payment method available is a credit card. Right now, if you want to switch to an invoice payment method, that involves a support call. That's something we're eventually looking at making self-service, but it's probably not going to happen because there's a bunch of credit check type activity, and it's a very high-touch activity. So we want to make sure that you're a good actor and that we can get a good invoice from you. So that's still support initiated. I can download my current usage details. I have a quick link to contact Microsoft support. Edit subscription details, I'll click on that in a second. I can change my subscription address, so if my organization moves, or if my personal information changes, I can move that. I can cancel the subscription. Down here, I've got a bunch of basic data about the subscription. I've got the subscription ID. This is going to be important if you ever have to call support to identify your subscription. I've got the offer that I'm using. That we just talked a bunch about offers, so this is a pay-as-you-go offer. I haven't made any commitment up front. I'm not really getting any particular discount right now, and it's active. So if I want to edit subscription details, I'll click that, and really the details are pretty trivial. This is about managing my service administrator, because sometimes we want somebody different doing the billing than who's managing the service. And I can also change the subscription name to something more friendly. It started off as pay-as-you-go. I changed it to MatsD. And then on the main pane here, you see a summary of my rated usage so far. So usage might be I used a certain number of database units, and then the rated usage is the actual bill for that. So $3.87 is what you see right there. And this is the running total as we go through. If we click over to billing history, we'll be able to see that I can go back, I can look at my current usage, but I can also go back and I can download invoices, or I can, where it says download and only the word download, I'm downloading my usage for every one of these billing periods prior. And I can go take a look at that usage. That usage comes in that comma-separated values file that we're going to take a look at in some more depth in just a moment. And this is where it really says this VM used this many gigabytes, used this many compute hours, had this much network traffic in, had this much network traffic out. That's where you get all the real data to understand your bill and understand what's happening on your subscription from a management perspective as well. There's a nice link to understand your bill here at the top. Hopefully, after this session, most of that will be redundant. So that's just a quick tour through the accounts portal. There's not a lot of depth here, but these things are critical. If you need to change a payment method or change your payment instrument, update your credit card, this is where you would come. You can also find out things like where you purchased it, what's your estimated next bill. So this is getting into that forecasted sort of idea of how we're actually forecasting. If you continue like you're using so far, your next bill is going to be around $15. It's not actually $15 yet, and that's why those numbers don't quite add up to $15 or $14.70. And then the current billing period. So this is when my billing period begins and ends. So let's get back to the slides. So I can't talk about subscription management without talking a little bit about identity. You have to have the right identity, and you have to understand identity a little bit to get subscription management right on top of Microsoft right now. And this is something we're investing very heavily in improving at Microsoft. But I want to take a little bit and explain the model to you guys so that you understand how this works, and you can navigate it if you find yourself in a confusing situation. So right now at Microsoft, as we grew up with two separate worlds, the commercial world serving organizations and enterprises, and the consumer world with services like Hotmail and OneDrive as they were historically, we ended up with two identity systems. One identity system is called the Microsoft account system. It used to be called Windows Live ID before that. And there's also the Azure Active Directory system. And this is the commercial system. This is what allows large organizations, small organizations to manage their identities in the cloud. This is the system that Office 365 is entirely built upon, Azure AD. And that's how you can take your on-premises Active Directory, sync it up to the cloud, and you can use those users for Azure as well. Now, the crime here and the challenge is that with these two systems, I can have an account with the same username in each system. And that means two different passwords. So matt@microsoft.com could exist as an MSA, a Microsoft account, and an Azure AD account. We often call them a work or school account. And so anybody's account for their organization right now, today, can exist in both systems. Now, we're looking at a lot of options for how we fix that, because we don't think any mere mortal can understand that they have two accounts with the same name at Microsoft and understand which to use in which context. I'm going to demo sort of how you can see this a little bit in action. Right now, sign-up defaults to your MSA account. And if you ever try to use an account that has a consumer domain, so if I use, you saw my live.com account from way back when, if you used outlook.com, gmail.com, yahoo.com, we know that those only exist in MSA, so we'll help you get to MSA and use the correct account. It's only when you're using accounts that are associated with organizations or not associated with a large consumer web email provider that we actually sometimes have to give you a choice about which account did you mean to use in this context. And that choice will look like what you see on the right. So it'll say, hey, it looks like admin@steelstavern.org is used with more than one account. Do you want to use your work or school account, or do you want to use your Microsoft account? The Microsoft account is going to tend to be your personal account. It's going to tend to be the same account you would use, say, with Xbox or with Hotmail or a bunch of our other consumer services. And then your work or school account is going to be the one that's been assigned by your organization. Or if you're the administrator of your organization, maybe you created that yourself. So I'm going to move on. Let me go back just for a second. This is a pretty important concept. I'm going to demo this experience in just a second, so you'll have a chance to see it again. And then just a note about the Q&A again. We can come back to any slide. We can come back to anything we've talked about. I used to be on the identity team for about 10 years, so I have a lot of experience with this and the plans in place to go fix it, so I'm happy to talk about it if anybody has questions. The other aspect I wanted to talk about when it comes to identity and subscriptions is that if you have Azure AD and you're working with Azure AD, and you will have Azure AD if you sign up for Azure. Everybody that signs up for Azure, whether they use a Microsoft account or they use a work or school account, will have Azure AD in the background. If you come with a Microsoft account that you've been using for Xbox, underneath the covers, we take that Microsoft account and we put an Azure AD directory underneath it, and we add that Microsoft account as a guest in that directory, and we make them the administrator of the directory. So that's something that happens whenever you sign up for Microsoft Azure. So you're still using that Microsoft account, but you actually have a directory. So if you go into the management portal, you'll see on the Active Directory tab, you'll see one. And you can actually see your Active Directory that you can go create accounts in, and you can use those accounts to sign in. You can give those accounts to the people you're working with. The Azure subscription actually belongs to that directory. It's part of that directory. And what does that mean? That means that the policies that are in that directory for authentication and authorization will apply down onto that Azure subscription, the same way they apply down onto, say, an Office subscription, where I have Exchange or SharePoint, and all the users in that Azure AD can access that Exchange or SharePoint. And so this is an important concept. How does it actually manifest itself? Well, if your subscription belongs to an Azure Active Directory or a directory, you can only invite the work accounts from that directory. We take the privacy in these directories very seriously, so we don't allow you to enumerate or find out about accounts that exist in someone else's directory. And so you can only add those accounts as co-admins or give them an RBAC role on your directory. Sometimes folks find that they signed up, they got a directory, but their organization also uses Office 365, and they want to move their subscription over to be under the directory used by Office 365. Today, to do that the right way and plumb it fully through, that requires a call to support, where you say, I need to do a transfer from my MSA account over into my organization account that exists inside the right directory. And we can talk about that a whole bunch. This is just an important concept to have in the back of your head as you think about how directories and Azure work together. It's a little bit challenging today because when you look at the management portal, you'll see that Active Directory looks like another resource in the subscription, the same way storage or VMs or cloud services are under a subscription. They belong to that subscription. But the relationship is actually in the inverse. You can have multiple Azure subscriptions belonging to one directory, but you can't have multiple directories belonging to one Azure subscription. So let's take a moment and look at what that experience looks like. Yeah. So we'll start in private so that we don't have any cookies or anything like that. And we'll go to manage.windowsazure.com, and you'll see this account discovery experience I've been talking about. So it's going to say, hey, type the email address of the account you want to sign in with. Since I'm in private, normally I'd see like a list of tiles, and I'd be able to pick the account that I want to use, that I've used previously on this machine. But in private, it doesn't forward any of these cookies. So this is like it's a brand new machine or it's a brand new account. So if I type that address that you guys saw before, it'll take me directly, it's matt.steele@live.com, it'll take me directly to the Microsoft account sign-in page. And here I enter my password for my MSA. This is my personal account. And everything, all the right things will happen. So let's try another one here. We'll see what it looks like when it's an organization account. So if I say ignite at my personal directory, this is a user I created last night. That is a work or school account. So it stays right here, asks you for the password. This will be the right password. If we cancel out of this and we type in something that exists in both systems, we're going to get that choice we saw before, where it says, looks like there are two accounts that match this sign-in string. And we've done a bunch of analysis on the overlap here. It's fairly small. It's only about 2% or so of the population of accounts. But here, I have to make the choice. And depending on how I make this choice, it'll take me to the right place to sign in so that I'm using the right credentials. So if I say work or school, it'll take me right here. If I go back, it'll take me to, and I click Microsoft account, it'll take me to Microsoft account. So that's a quick overview on identity. That's important as you're signing up and you're coming new to Azure to understanding some of the challenges that we have there and are working through, so that you don't get too confused as that happens. So, billing invoice and usage CSV walkthrough. We'll start very briefly by looking at an invoice. So, this is a blacked out invoice. It's not actually mine, but it has a bunch of the details that you might find on an invoice. It has our old branding from a couple years ago. That'll be fixed momentarily. You see the billing cycle. This is when the usage that you're seeing on this bill occurred. So in this case, the usage occurred between August 8th and September 8th. Then you see invoice date. That's when the invoice was generated. That's usually the anniversary date of when you purchase your first subscription with Microsoft. That invoice date is a little bit after this date. And then your credit card will be charged 10 days after that invoice date yet again. So there's a few delays in the system there. In this case, the payment method is invoice. Other payment methods are credit card, and if you're in other geographies, we have other payment methods like Alipay in China, things along those lines. The invoice is pretty self-explanatory. It's almost more like a statement. You see previous balance, in this one was $700, no payments, You have an outstanding balance from the previous billing cycle. In this case, it's a credit because it's negative. Your current charges, so you had 148 in this billing period, some discounts and adjustments, and then you have your pre-tax and accounting for your taxes, and then the total amount due. In this case, it zeroes out. So this one, there's not a lot here. There's a few more pages in the invoice when you actually get it, and you download it as PDF. Those pages usually have some sort of FYI or heads up about various offers or details about the bill that are important to consider. Let's go over and take a more detailed look, though, at the usage CSV, which is where the fun things really happen. Okay, so I took this usage CSV and I made it an Excel file. I pretty much just straight converted it. The main reason I wanted to do that is so I could save the column widths, because otherwise when you load a CSV into Excel, all the column widths are very, very, very small, and we can't really read things without going through a few steps. There's 3 sections at the top here, and I've highlighted the titles here. There's this top section, which is just some overall details about your subscription. There's your statement in CSV form, which is a set of rated usage that's rolled up across all the resources and all the things that are happening inside your subscription. And then under here, we have the detailed usage. So we can, if we will briefly look at the statement here, which is the rated usage, and we can see a few aspects here. Name, and most of the column headings here between this top part and then the detailed bottom part, they mean the same thing. So name here is about the type of usage that's happening. Resource is really the name of the actual meter, like what is actually being measured here. So you see data transfer in gigabytes, storage transactions in tens of thousands, compute hours, standard I/O in gigabytes. So these are what is actually being measured here, as opposed to this sort of high level, it's networking. Then there's over here, there's region, but more importantly, there's the unit here. How many were consumed? So in this case, you see 124. That means I consumed 124 compute hours. How many were included in your offer? Not much. Only here, when we look at, I believe it was data transfer out, I have 5 gigabytes of data transfer out included in my offer just by default. And then, so how much of this was billable? In my case, none of the data transfer out was billable because I didn't even come close to getting to that 5. And then, if I was part of a commitment offer, I would see how much was within the commitment, but I'm not part of a commitment offer. I also see overage here as applicable. And then here's the rate that I pay per unit consumed that ends up being billable. And then all of that just multiplies out to here. This is the value that I've paid. So for this last item, which is the data I/O, I'm paying $1.32 for geo-redundant page blob disk. So this is the roll-up, very much of a coarse-grained look at how you're spending money. Useful in some ways, but in many others, you're going to want to come down to the detailed usage here. So detailed usage, we see a usage date, we see the same name, we see resource GUID. You should just ignore resource GUID. Resource GUID is an identifier for the actual meter of what's being measured. So it's not very useful in terms of understanding what's happening. It's the data transfer out resource GUID effectively at that point. We see type, where some of the meters will provide a little bit of additional information. We'll see region, some of the same units here. You see unit, consumed, sub-region, West US. So you see we were in zone 1 for this overall region of networking, and then West US was the actual sub-region. Sometimes the sub-region is the same. You'll see that in the second line here. The service, so you see the service here says compute, but the name was networking. And that's because this networking meter is coming off of my compute village. So I have a VM that's running, that's consuming some network. And so that's what service means. So it's a bit of a more subtle concept. It's about what service am I using that's causing this particular meter to get consumed. Come over here to component. This is where you actually find the component, and you see some of my silly names here. But this is the actual component in the management portal that I created. It's the name of the VM. The VM I created was called Foo Nation. And then 3 down, you see this is the VHD that maps up to that, and I can map those together if I look on the portal. This is the actual SQL database that I have and the name of that SQL database, and this is the name of the website that I'm running as ID brand. The additional fields here are just additional info, and it varies basically per service that you're using, what information you get there. So you can see here, I have compute extra small, so that's a little bit of information that this is actually being computed based on the extra small size, an A1 VM as it were. So in this case, you can see I start out 111, and then the usage CSV goes all the way down to the end of my billing period on 211. And you see a lot of these items repeated. They're repeated on a daily basis about how much am I consuming every single day of those various resources that I have. And this one is downloaded from early 2015. Okay. So that's a walk through understanding the CSV file. Now we're going to talk about the usage API and do a little bit of a demo of the usage API. So I talked before about IT financial management, and that plays into Azure cost management and cost optimization. There's 2 APIs we're going to talk about. One is called the usage API, and this is where I just get the pure usage. How many compute hours, how many gigabytes, how many storage IOs did I do? And then there's the rate card API, which is more of a static API, which says, given the offer that I've signed up for, how much do I pay for a gigabyte of storage? How much do I pay for an A1 extra small compute hour? And so you'll send your offer ID into that and get those numbers back. And then once you have the full usage and the rate card, any reasonable app can then multiply those together to get a rated usage to find out what you're trending for. Now, rated usage, even if I take all the rated usage for a month, it still won't be my bill. I might have credits, whether because of the offer that I have, like MSDN, if I have a $150 credit. I might have called up to support and had an issue and asked them to adjust my bill accordingly because of an SLA issue or because of some other challenge I've had. I also have taxes that I pay on top of all those things when everything's over. So the invoice and the bill is a little bit different than the rated usage. But the rated usage gives you that run rate that helps you figure out, how am I trending? How am I going here? And that's what these apps use. I'm going to talk about a few apps that are actually on the demo floor in just a second. These apps use to give you a forecast, also to help you understand what usage happened underneath the project that was tagged as, our super secret, critical company project versus what usage happened under the finance department. Gartner breaks down the ITFM functionality in phases in those 3 buckets up there. And so you can see capabilities spanning basic, intermediate, and advanced. The basic is let's just get the information, and let's do very basic budgeting and forecasting. We have very basic forecasting today in the accounts portal. But we want to start getting into much more detailed forecasting. Detailed forecasting about what is your run rate? How does it compare to how you used things last time? Do you have a cyclical every month peak that we can actually account for? These are things that we can begin to apply, things like machine learning and other fantastic tools we have in the Azure toolbox to give you a much more accurate prediction of your bill. Right now, it's sort of a straight line estimate based on your current usage and where you are along your billing cycle. As we get down into advanced, we start to think about performance management. Like, am I getting the best bang for my buck? And how am I optimizing my performance? Should I be taking steps to get to pay less, or should I move over to a different offer because my usage is so high, I can actually commit to a certain amount and save a whole bunch of money? And then this is a picture just pulled sort of purely from that Gartner public paper. I have the URL. It used to be on the slide, but I made a last-minute adjustment. I have the URL for this Gartner paper. If anyone's interested, I'll update the slides before they go live on the website, so you can come back to this slide. You'll see the URL for the Gartner paper. It's a public paper. No one has to pay for it. So that usage API is a real thing, and we have partners that have demos on the floor that have built on it. If you're interested in joining, let me know after the session. I'll give you the distribution list that you should sign up for. Or again, you can come back to these, and that'll be part of that slide as well. We have a private preview of the usage API right now that some of these partners have built on top. If you're a developer or you really just want to do some really fun things actually consuming this API, come talk to me, and we'll get you on that DL. We're fairly lax in terms of the private preview. We just want folks to come on in and try it out and give us feedback. We're likely going forward with a public preview in the very early part of the summer. So you'll see this publicly in just a little while if you don't want to go through the private preview. So here's some details about the usage API. It's a REST API. It's meant for getting that usage. You get first and third-party usage. So if you're using third-party VMs from the VM marketplace, you can get those. And it includes usage for all the Azure offer types. It will include resource tags. So if you've gone into the Azure Preview portal and you've tagged something, like I said, tagged it Finance Department or tagged it with project equals foo or something along those lines, you'll actually get that in that API. One of the things you noticed in that CSV that we just went through, you didn't see the tags or the resource group that you can set in the Azure Preview portal. We have another private preview of that coming momentarily in the usage CSV. If you'd like to sign up for that as well, come talk to me or take a look at the slides. We'll have the distribution list that you can just send mail to sign up for that private preview to get tags and resource groups in the CSV as well. So that's what resource metadata is talking about there. Some things like service type, but really one of the biggest things not mentioned explicitly is that resource group in the Azure Resource Manager. And then the other great thing here is that in the preview portal, you might have seen some of our RBAC capabilities. We can assign readers, contributors, owners at very, very fine-grained detail. The usage API supports that as well, so you can assign someone reader without giving them full admin permission across all of your subscriptions. So that's a big win there as well. The rate card is, like I said, a little bit more simplistic. We talk a little bit about what included quantities are available for the offer that you have. We have all the available Azure resources, so if you just want an inventory of everything and how much it costs, you can get that from that rate card API. We have pre-tax rates in that, and it also supports Azure RBAC. And in that, you'll have things like, we do support things like graduated pricing. So there are places where we have graduated pricing in Azure about how much you pay for the first, say, 100 gigabytes that you consume versus when you go past that, you start to pay a lower rate. That's also supported by the rate card API. So now we're going to do a demo of a sample application using that. If you want to see real applications using it, I'll highlight the partners in just a moment that are actually building on top of it. They have demos at their booths, and I'll give you their booth numbers. Excuse me. So this is coded by another project manager at Microsoft. His name is Moynak. He worked a lot on this usage API. I did the demo 10 times, and it worked 10 times, and I did it the 11th, and there was some sort of spontaneous networking failure, so let's hope. So this is a fictional company called CloudSense, and this is just an app that's been written reasonably quickly in Visual Studio. I'm going to click on my Worker School account. There's that choice that we saw from before. Oh, and there we are. So I'm having an issue not being signed in, so let me just sign out real quick. After I sign out there we are. Fortunately, it'll force me to sign in and sign out again. All right, so let's try this again. So you can see we're running off of localhost on this Visual Studio app, our fictional ITFM vendor CloudSense. And I have a whole bunch of choices of what I'm going to use. I'm actually going to choose to use my Ignite 2 account. This is a test account I created. And I'll sign in. This Ignite 2 account I created as a test account. I gave it access to my Azure subscription. Now, it has permission. I've already given this app permission to act on my behalf out to the subscription. And now I'm going to say, connect to this particular subscription. This is the Matt Stee subscription that you were looking at before. And the app running locally is actually reaching out to this usage API and connecting. And now it's made a successful connection. And you'll see some of the same names that you saw in the CSV before, based on, they're called projects here. We don't have a bunch of tag usage here, but you can see it actually was able to pull my current usage and my current spend on a bunch of different aspects. Now, this is just a demo app. You'll have something much clearer as you look at some of the vendors. I can disconnect and I can choose for it to stop managing the subscription. I can look at my spending here, all of 16 cents and 36 cents, since I'm close to the beginning here of the next cycle. But that's a sense of I can just write an app fairly quickly, and I can build on top of this usage API. So let's take a look at what are the cloud vendors that we have that are building real apps on top of this right now. Cloud Cruiser is in booth 220, and you can see a much more rich app here talking about all kinds of trends. What are my pie charts? Who's spending more than they should be? What do my budgets look like? Lots of details there. Using Azure tags you can use there, as well as Cloudin. And Cloudin is in booth number 4. Again, some much deeper data here, looking at how my VM usage goes across all the different offerings, how it trends over time, graphs, and lots of more useful, consumable analysis about what kind of spending is happening. So we do have a lot of time for Q&A. I know that some folks will want to go back and take a look at some of these things. For a second, I just want to talk about what is coming soon. So coming soon, we have that new CSV format. I talked about the private preview for that CSV format. We also have this usage API preview coming to public preview and GA. It's in private preview right now. We also have some investments we're going to be making over the summer to take those usage CSVs and dump them in a storage account of your choice. Some of our competitors do that. You might be used to that. So you can dump them in storage accounts. You can pick those CSV up and do automated analysis on it. This is if you didn't want to use the usage API for whatever reason, or you had a product that worked with our competitors, and then you wanted to just pull it over, didn't want to make changes and adopt the usage API, you just wanted to pick the CSV up and do the processing directly on top of that. Those are things that are coming relatively soon. Areas we're investing, notification alert management. So you saw very basic alerts in preview. We'll be finishing off that capability and then bringing in a lot of capabilities around analysis of tags, analysis of resource groups, what's going on there. We'll have more ways to buy Azure over time here. We'll be expanding into more geographies. So most folks here are from North America, but not all. As we go into more geographies, it's important to be in the local currency. It makes actually consuming the cloud a little bit easier if it's in your local currency. You don't have to worry about currency risk. So we'll be adding more geographies and more local currencies over time. We're doing improvements in sign-up as well. Folks who have had trouble with sign-up are pretty passionate about that. We'll be pulling most of these capabilities into the Azure Preview portal. So lighting these up in what the team internally calls a BISA or a BITHA. And then we're going to be adding more and more self-service. So there are things that you can't do today, like if you wanted to delete a credit card, you can't do that in that accounts portal today. Now, most folks just want to come in, add a new one, set it as the card that's going to get charged. But there's a lot of ancillary activities or reasons that you might just want to remove an older credit card, especially some of those scenarios that I was talking about before about role changes or someone gets terminated and it was their credit card on it. They just, they want that removed. They want proof that it's been removed. So self-service options like that are coming. And finally, over time, more payment options for how you can actually pay your bill. Things like I talked about in China, we have Alipay. We'll be adding more and more payment options. A lot of those are geography specific, but some of them aren't. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. There's a lot of time left for questions, so we can get in lots of depth. And I'll set aside my passes here as I get questions. So $100 each one of these free Azure for anybody who asks a question. I am not ashamed to beg. Yep. Yep. So the question was, let's say my employees have used their personal MSAs or they've used their MSAs with the company's address. So in my case, it would be using my matt@microsoft.com MSA. And the organization wants to kind of pull those into Azure Active Directory so that they can actually manage those identities. They can do all the kind of rich things you can do in Azure AD, like reset passwords, disable users when they've been compromised, all that kind of interesting stuff. Where do you even start to start taking those MSAs over and pulling them into Azure AD? Right now, there's not a great story, to be quite honest. The main place to start is calling support. And you're basically going to do a batch transfer. So you're going to create the accounts that you have. Maybe you already have the accounts in Azure Active Directory that you want to use. And then you're going to talk to your employees about the MSAs that they're using. And once you have the list of MSAs, you're going to call support and you're going to ask for a batch account transfer, account ownership transfer. And you're going to take each of these subscriptions that they own and do an ownership transfer over. Over the last 6 months or so, we've had some internal platform changes that occasionally have blocked some of these ownership transfers for a small amount of time. Most of that will be done entirely over the summer, and we can now on demand unblock these things. So if you've had any trouble with ownership transfers before, most of those issues are addressed. Unfortunately, the answer today is to call support and then go ahead and start a batch transfer through support. As we have that self-service subscription transfer, you'll be able to self-service do that yourself, or the employee will be able to self-service transfer to their own account. And that'll improve it. One of the things we want to grow to past this self-service transfer is A, cleaning up the identity story altogether, and then B, having more of a team-based ownership where I'm just changing ACLs. I don't have like an individual owner of a subscription that's accountable for all billing. Since Azure grew up on some of the consumer stack like Microsoft accounts and like some of our consumer commerce stack, a lot of the ownership defaulted to individual, and that's one of the things we're working to fix right now. Yeah?
You mentioned there was rates in that detailed billing. Is it assumed that the rates are universal regardless of where you have a region, or were they region Singapore versus US West versus Europe, assume they would have different rates day in, day out?
Yeah. So the question was, we talked about rate card and rates per offer. Are the rates uniform across all regions, or do they vary by regions? And it depends on the actual service that you're using. Some services are uniform across all regions, and some services actually change per region. And so if it is a service that changes per region, the API will make clear that this is the price for this region. You're at that microphone, so you win.
Thanks. We're a managed service provider. Lately, a lot of our customers want us to manage their Azure subscriptions for them.
Yep.
So we're noticing multi-tenancy is not real easy with Azure. So just any hints or tips as far as not necessarily transferring subscriptions, but they want us to start them up for them. And obviously, we're not in their Azure AD, but we, for the people that manage that, we'd like them to be able to handle with their account single sign-on. Yep. and manage the tenants that we have.
Absolutely. So this is a scenario that we're starting to, and we actually have been investing fairly heavily in for a while. We'll be talking a lot more about improvements coming for partners that are managing Azure on behalf of their customers, or even reselling Azure to their customers, and then they want to manage it for their customers. Sometimes managing Azure is not a very simple thing. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of value you can provide your customers by managing it for them. Ways to start there. Like I said, we'll have a whole bunch more we can talk about this summer that's going to make a lot of things much, much easier for folks that are trying to admin on behalf of. A lot of built-in tools there Today, if you have to do that, my recommendation would be to start with an MSA, because you can put an MSA today in almost any directory. So you can give the customer their own directory. You can use your MSA basically as something that can pop up in any directory. You can manage on their behalf in that directory. It also gives the customer ultimate control. If something isn't going entirely perfectly, they have the ability to sort of say, okay, I don't want to use that MSA anymore. I want to use just my organization. So they can continue to grow up that way. Eventually, org accounts will have all the exact same capabilities, and customers will have those capabilities with org accounts, or work or school accounts, as we call them. They're just not there right now. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about more this summer. Yep.
When you have an MSA that has an MSDN account attached to it, how do you differentiate between the corporate spend and that MSDN spend as far as on the bill?
On the bill, so the question was, how do you differentiate between the MSDN spend and the corporate spend on the bill? So a couple things. There will be MSDN spend that's entirely outside of Azure. And so the easy way to differentiate that is that it won't show up on the Azure bill. The MSDN spend that comes inside of Azure, MSDN is a specific offer inside of Azure. And so an entire subscription will be dedicated to MSDN. So if you look at all the spending on that subscription, it will be MSDN only. So at a high level, the main way to differentiate is by subscription. If you had within a single subscription, somebody using their personal MSDN but doing both corporate and personal things inside that subscription, you'd have to start looking at like dividing them out by resource groups or dividing them out by tags. And so that's a more challenging situation, but more tools are coming to help and make that a little bit easier. All right, question.
So maybe you touched on this 2 questions back and I didn't understand the answer, but a large enterprise, if you have a single enrollment, there's no way to directly tie the billing or the commit to departments. Is there any plans to move that down? Our only alternative is to have multiple enrollments, which then creates a number of technical issues in terms of extending our network and such. So we would prefer to have a single enrollment for our entire institution, but it's individual departments and their POs and billing at the department level, but there's no way to automatically.
So you have an enterprise agreement, and you want to have one enrollment for that.
That would be our preference from a technical perspective.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you've looked very recently, and it should be live now, but we have departments and alert management in departments in the EA portal. We didn't talk about that today.
Right, but you still can't tie the actual purchase to that department level. You can't push it down. They're all sharing the same commitment if you're in a commitment type.
Right. So within a subscription will end up belonging to a single department effectively, and so you can't within a subscription, if you need to divide out, your best option at that point is either to go with resource groups or tags, and tag things along the department. So you say the department equals finance or something along those lines inside the tag as you tag resources. Not all resource providers support tags today. So the new compute resource providers and network providers and storage providers that were announced at Build here all support tags, but some of the older infrastructure doesn't. So if you're doing IaaS and VMs, you're in pretty good shape. You can move to using tags. But if not, you have to wait for some of these services to come and support tags. The other thing is then you have tags way down in sort of the management plane as opposed to up in your EA portal. So that's something we're looking at right now. We don't have a great answer for. We'd like to have a single unified way to do that. But I'd love to hear more about your requirements and chat more about it.
Okay.
Thanks. Yep. Yeah.
Just wondering, in terms of the usage API, what sort of granularity you can get out of the API, and if there's anything you're going to be putting in the usage CSVs that go to storage that wouldn't be in the API.
There's nothing we're going to put in the usage CSV that would go to storage that would not be in the API.
Okay.
Now let me go back and pull up the usage API slide. So in terms of granularity, it's hourly and daily.
Okay.
And so you can ask for both hourly and daily. Most folks we've talked to are interested in daily, but there are some folks that really, really want the hourly, understanding some of their trends there. In terms of granularity, it's going to be the same. In terms of granularity for resources, it's going to be the same granularity that we have in the CSV today. One of the things we've heard about the CSV is that it would be good to make it easier to tie together, especially in the case of VMs, how my data usage for the VM in terms of hard disk actually ties up to the particular VM. So that's one of the things that we know we need to go improve. You saw it in the usage CSV before, where we had lots of the things belonging to the VM were very clear, and the storage was a little bit different. So that's one thing we need to improve. But in terms of the granularity, it'll be the same level of granularity.
And with the with the tags, do those go, like if you tag a VM, would that go also with the the data associated with that VM? Would that tag automatically be applied there? Okay.
Yeah, that would flow entirely. So you could tag a VM once, and it would go across both. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you measure what you bill for? Is it based off of, say, something equivalent to perf mon counters? And if so, is it based off of averages, say, over the month, or actual totals of, say, storage I/O or whatever?
I can talk a little bit about it to get you like a real detailed algorithm on it. I'd have to go back and talk to some folks. But I'm happy to do that. The measurement is the average over the course of a day, and then we add up all the dailies across the entire month. Now, there's some interesting situations there today where we bill for storage. We bill per month, but we do a month based on 31 days. And so, in any month like February, we're actually dividing by 28 the monthly rate. And so you're actually saving money in February for storage versus in January, where you're paying the actual amount we advertise on the page. So there are some interesting nuances like that. Whenever we have a nuance like that, we err in the favor of the customer. In terms of the detailed algorithm of exactly how it's weighted average, how fast we're sampling, things like that, I'd have to go back to some devs and ask. Yep.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about billing management.
Yep.
I work as a consultant manager, and we are currently trying to push our development environments into Azure instead of having them in Hyper-V locally.
Sure.
And what we're doing is that we're creating unique subscriptions for each customer.
Okay.
And it works very well. We give the developers co-admin access to the subscriptions, so they can create their own VMs and so on. It's just that I get stuck with managing the bills. So right now it's only 10 or so subscriptions, but in a year maybe it's 30, in 2 years maybe 60 or something. Do you have any recommendations on how to?
I think my recommendation would be very similar to the gentleman that came up originally to the microphone in the red shirt, where unfortunately it's wait a little bit of time. We do hear you. We think that's a real scenario. It's a scenario that we want to invest heavily in making easier. It's to our advantage to invest heavily in that because we know a lot of folks like you are out there sort of pushing Azure, helping people to use Azure, helping with the complexities and adding value. I don't have anything that we can announce right now. For what you can do right now, using Microsoft accounts and separate subscriptions per customer is the best advice that I can give. It sounds like you're probably doing most of that already, giving folks access to those subscriptions, using RBAC to train down that access to give a least privilege side of things. Those are sort of the high-level best practices that we have right now. We'll have a bunch of tools coming into play. You can look at what's available for Office right now. In terms of partners that manage Office on behalf of other customers, as some indication of the direction that we're going there, and look at the tools that are available to those folks. And we'll be giving those tools to partners that want to manage on behalf of and do a lot more rich sort of reseller and managed service provider scenarios on top of Azure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, you talked a little bit about just now and sort of throughout the session on managing on behalf of.
Yep.
You also mentioned, but didn't really go into enterprise Azure. Can you talk about, I guess, why one would not use enterprise Azure for that purpose? And are the changes that are coming up related to that or just something else?
There's a bunch of work we have to do to rationalize all the work we're doing with what's available in the EA portal today for Enterprise Azure Indirect. So you can sign an EA with a partner, or you can sign it with Microsoft. And this is something I've learned a great deal about recently, and I'm by no means an expert in. When you sign an EA with a partner, so it's an indirect relationship with Microsoft, the partner is managing most things for you, and you have some visibility into what's happening there, but not a lot. So what we're doing with this effort coming up in the summer is just adding a lot of tools and a lot more capabilities. One of the things we do have to do is rationalize how it fits in with the EA Indirect program as it exists today. There's not going to be any major impact there in any short fashion or any major announcement that impacts folks that are in EA Indirect. Folks that are already in EA Indirect might find that they're very, very happy staying where they are. There are additional benefits of the EA, both in terms of prices and in terms of some of the tools that are available to manage EAs. So the announcements coming in the summer are going to be more of a tooling type of announcement along those lines.
So then you're saying that managing on behalf of, like, say, a department is not a reason to go sign an EA?
I wouldn't presume to recommend one way or the other, honestly. And I know that's a terribly lame answer. This is another thing I'd be happy to follow up on and give you like a very, very detailed pros and cons. Like, here's where I'd go with EA. Here's where I'd go with some of the future programs. To be quite honest, I don't know them off the top of my head yet, because the thing to be announced in the summer is still in flux. And so I can't either sort of pre-announce it with sort of unreliable data or really kind of compare the two very well. But if you want to reach out, like, we do have some private preview happening on that as well, and we can give you some detailed, here's where we are, here's what our thoughts are, because we do want feedback on it.
Hi there.
Yep.
My question is around Azure Marketplace billing. So today, as we're trying to show our success stories, we go and sort by a subscription, and it shows the Azure cost, then we have to go somewhere else to see the marketplace costs. Are there any plans to integrate that in any fashion?
So as part of coming into the preview portal, we're coming, at least from a user experience perspective, closer to that Azure Marketplace team that offers that. And so having a much more seamless interaction there and a much more seamless view of how you actually, what you're spending in Marketplace versus what you're spending on first-party Azure is absolutely something we want. Obviously, you always want to be able to differentiate, and we have to differentiate for tax purposes and a bunch of other purposes, what goes to first-party versus what goes to third-party, things that we're selling as an agent or as a reseller. But having a unified system there is hugely desirable. The subsystems underneath today are very, very, very different. So it's not something we can make happen really fast, but it's part of our vision, and I probably should have put it up there as one of the areas of investment. Yep.
Hi. Can you move subscriptions between tenants?
Yes. So that account ownership transfer that I was talking about to the first question, if I change my owner from an account in one tenant to an account in another tenant, it will change the tenant that subscription belongs to. And we found over the course of the last few months as we've been working on the self-service account transfer, we found a bug there that there was a period of time where that wasn't respected and it wasn't happening properly. And so it created a bunch of extra work on support to clean that up properly. We're fixing that. I think we actually already fixed it. So when you do that account transfer between two accounts that exist in the two different directories, even if they're MSA accounts in the two different directories, you'll actually get that subscription changing the directory that it belongs to, so that you can start inviting users from the other directory or having the policies from the other directory apply.
Can I ask one more?
Sorry. Yeah.
So if I create a new, let's say, a pay-as-you-go Azure subscription, I'm, of course, the billing administrator, and on the management portal, I'm a global administrator, so I'm allowed to manage everything. If I add a new global administrator on the management portal, he is not a billing administrator. How can I get a second person to manage everything about billing?
So that's a limitation of the system today. So first off, I want to go back to just, I can't really go back very fast here. This piece. One thing he said that was a point I wanted to clarify is that it's the third sub-bullet under the top main bullet, is the directory has different roles than the subscription. And I know this wasn't your point, but as you said, global administrator, I just wanted to make sure folks understand that the global administrator in the directory is different than in a service or subscription administrator down on the subscription. So they could be the same person or they could be different. Just because you're a global administrator in the directory today doesn't mean you're a subscription administrator, though we may change that over time. Now, that aside, the relationship of billing and service administration, today there's a fundamental limitation in Azure where only one person can be a billing administrator on an Azure subscription. And so I can be, as a single person, I can be manage multiple Azure subscriptions and being the billing administrator on multiple Azure subscriptions, but I can't then share that with my coworker. And that's that team-based ownership that we want to add in, and that's a place that we're investing as well right now and thinking about when we can deliver that. Because it's not very functional for organizations to assign all of this onto one person and not be able to share that or add extra people or pull people away. So today, if you want to manage the service, you can add you can add co-admins, you can have multiple RBAC owners in the Azure Preview Portal and the Azure Resource Manager. But when it comes to billing, there can only be one person.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi. I think I saw ROI in one of your slides. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Sorry, you think you saw ROI, you said? Yeah. Or?
Return on investment, right?
Yeah. I think that was on the Gartner slide. Let me just pull that back. Yeah, performance metrics, TCO, ROI. So in terms of return on investment, this is about that advanced performance management. So getting a sense of how much money am I spending and how much performance am I getting out of that money that I'm spending. And that's this sort of highest level of IT financial management, because you do want to start to do that. You want to do that because as you look at Microsoft and other cloud vendors, you want to make sure that you're getting the best deal that you can get at Microsoft, and that the best deal that you can get at Microsoft compares very favorably to the best deal you can get at other cloud vendors. So that's mainly what I mean by ROI in that advanced piece there. Most of this framing is coming from Gartner, but it's getting a sense of like the size of the VM in very, very raw numbers in terms of memory, storage, the size of the processor that's being used in the VM and that's dedicated to the VM. Those things versus the cost that you're spending. So what's effectively like your return on investment? What's your performance metric there? And how, for your organization, how does that fit in? It's a very hand-wavy explanation, but that's sort of what that performance management. I'm not sure that ROI is a little bit more than performance management. So most of what I just talked about was performance management and getting the best deal at Microsoft or across multiple vendors. At Microsoft, you could certainly imagine tools saying like, hey, you should switch to an EA or you should switch to a monetary commitment deal given how much you're spending, and having knowledge of how the different offers from Microsoft actually trade off and when you should go from one to the other and helping to make that decision. So that's sort of that best deal at Microsoft aspect. Other questions? Yeah.
Could you just put forward 2 more slides?
Yep.
Yeah. On this one here, I guess this is just the rate card.
Yep.
So that particular piece is not available in the EA offer site.
Right. Right now, it's not. The EA subsystem uses a different rate API today.
The only reason why I was asking is because the actual usage API said it's available to all. So vendors like Cloud Cruiser or Cloud In could be used in an EA offer subscription, right?
For the usage, that's correct. Yeah. So in the short term here, as we don't have support for EA offers because of the custom pricing usually per EA, the Cloud Ins and the Cloud Cruisers of the world are going to be able to show you your usage, help you understand usage, but you'll have to import your prices basically manually.
Okay.
And those guys will be able to talk in a lot more depth about what they support there. Yes.
On the
Interesting. So you had a third-party SQL. This was third-party not offered by Microsoft, or third-party not part of your organization? Okay. Okay. Oh, I see. Yes. So third-party purchases right now inside of Marketplace or the Azure Store are not don't transfer very well, and so we have a bunch of machinery that we're working on right now to improve the transfer for those purchases. Yes. So if you want to send me some details of the exact third-party thing you bought, I can point you to where it was on the site. In the vCurrent management portal, it's in basically the bottom left-hand corner of the list of tabs. It'll have a list of what you bought third-party. So we're over time. Folks that ask questions, I counted out. I think we have plenty still. Come up and grab Azure Pass. Each one has a unique number on it. And for folks that didn't ask questions,